David Crystal susține că de când a apărut internetul, limba engleză a evoluat foarte mult și cu o viteză uluitoare, fapt care nu reprezintă însă și o amenințare. Totuși, riscurile ca multe din cuvinte să circule în forme scrise greșit, neconforme etimologiei, sunt mari. Și asta pentru că atunci când cineva scrie o carte, un articol științific, unul jurnalistic, trimite textul la verificat, pe când în fața calculatorului, în lumea virtuală, nimeni nu verifică nimic.
And so on the internet,
Pe internet pot scrie cum vreau eu. Mulți scriu așa cum au învățat, adică aproape asemănător. Încetul cu încetul însă oamenii vor simplifica multe cuvinte. David Crystal mai spune că, vrând nevrând, chiar și atunci când scriem un mesaj pe telefon, creăm un anume tip de limbaj. Constrânși de spațiul mic și de dorința de a comunica multe informații într-un timp cât mai scurt, adolescenții au creat forme de adresare asemănătoare unui cod. E bine de știut, mai spune reputatul lingvist, că unele prescurtări pot fi întâlnite încă de acum 100 și ceva de ani, pe vremea reginei Victoria. A fost foarte popular pentru mulți ani, dar se pare că acum acest tip de limbaj este pe moarte. A fost la modă pentru o vreme, dar acum nu mai e. David Crystal s-a născut în Irlanda de Nord, a fost profesor la University College London, unde a predat limba engleză, apoi lingvistica la University of Bangor. Este cunoscut ca autor al celor 2 enciclopedii de limbă engleză publicate de Cambridge University Press. El este și consultantul mai multor emisiuni realizate de posturile radio și de televiziune BBC. Puteți face cunoștință cu farmecul lui David Crystal urmărind un interviu acordat în exclusivitate reporterilor TVR Iași. Welcome to Yash, Professor David Crystal. You are a very famous linguist and teacher in UK, but now you are on a tour in Romania. Are you very fond of our civilization, or are you very fond of our Latin language?
Well, fond of both, actually. This isn't the first visit to Romania for me. My very first visit actually goes back, a long time. I was here in 1969. How many viewers will remember that year? When the International Congress of Linguists held its meeting here at the university, and that was my first visit, and a first little tour around Transylvania we had at that time as well, I remember. And then last year I was here for the British Council, and we visited Bucharest, of course, and Iași, and Timișoara, and it was a little lecture tour.
About what?
And it was on various language topics, you know, one kind and another. And that was my first really close encounter with Romanian as a language, which is one I'd studied a little bit before, but never really got into it in any depth. And it's a beautiful language, of course, and one that anybody really ought to study as often as they can. And so this year we're back again, so you see, 3 times, so I must love the place, mustn't I, if I'm here for a third time.
You will talk about
this
the
year,
Book of Many Colors.
The talks have been various. I was talking in Bucharest yesterday, and that was on one topic to do with the English language and the development of the language. And we'll be off to Cluj in a little while to talk about my autobiography there. And here in Iași we're talking about, yes, a book of many colours. It's the King James Bible, really. That's what we're talking about.
Who are these colours?
The colours, the allusion, anybody who knows the Old Testament will remember that there is a coat of many colours that turns up very importantly at one point. Somebody wears a coat of many colours. You remember the musical Joseph and his amazing Technicolor dream coat? Well, it's the same story. Now, the point about the lecture is to draw people's attention to the fact that an amazing number of idioms that we use in everyday English without thinking about it actually come from the Bible, and from the King James Bible in particular. King James Bible popularized these idioms, and coat of many colors is one, so book of many colors is the adaptation.
Which are these phrases that you are talking about?
Well, there are so many of them. There are over 250 of them, in fact, and they include things like, if I say to somebody, you're a thorn in my flesh, you're a thorn in my flesh. A thorn in the flesh, well, that comes straight out of the Bible. It means that you're irritating me, or something is irritating me. You are not a thorn in my flesh.
Okay, thank you very much.
No, but I could imagine some circumstances where things would be such. That's one. Or if I say to you, you say something very significant or very innocent, and it's so meaningful, and I say, that was out of the mouths of babes, out of the mouths of babes, out of the mouth of a babe, of a child, of a young child. In other words, you've said something that is so important, and yet a child could have said it. That's out of the Bible as well. Or that's a fly in the ointment, or you're a fly in the ointment. A fly in the ointment. What does that mean? It means that something is irritating, something is interfering, causing trouble, like a fly stuck in the ointment, you see. And I remember a few years ago reading a newspaper headline which said, Bush, Mr. George W. Bush, the American president, Bush is a fly in Blair's ointment. Now, Blair was Tony Blair, the British Prime Minister. So to say, the headline said, the writer said, the journalist said, Bush is a fly in Blair's ointment, meaning Mr. Bush is irritating Mr. Blair. He's not doing what Mr. Blair wants him to do. And this is straight out of the Bible again. And as I say, there are over 250 everyday phrases like that from the King James Bible.
You said in an article from the Guardian newspaper that spellings are made by people. Dictionaries eventually reflect popular choices, and the internet is allowing more people to influence spelling than ever before. Could you tell us more about this idea, please?
Yes. Yes, now everybody watching this program will remember the pain they had when they tried to read and write English for the first time. And spelling is the difficulty. It's a difficult language to spell. It never was that way at the beginning. In Old English, in Anglo-Saxon times, the spelling was very regular. But over the centuries, different people have tried to add things to the spelling, and they've made it more difficult. The French came in 1066 and added French spellings to English. In the 16th century, Latin and Greek spellings came into English, and so it has always been. Now, the thing about spelling is that you've got to get it correct, otherwise people will criticize you and say you're being careless or lazy or you're uneducated. And in order to check that our spellings are correct, there's a group of people who are paid to do this. They're called editors and sub-editors and copy editors and proofreaders. And everything you and the viewers have ever read in English, and I expect in Romanian too, it's gone through that system. Somebody has checked.
But on the internet?
But on the internet, woof, no. There's no copy editor looking over my shoulder saying, David, you're not spelling it right, or your punctuation is a bit wrong, you see. And so on the internet, I can spell as I like. Of course, most people will spell as they've been taught, so you won't see very much difference. But slowly, you are seeing new spellings come in as people simplify the spelling. And a good example is the word rhubarb, the food, where it is spelt R-H-U-B-A-R-B. The H was never there at the beginning. It was rhubarb without the H. The H came in classical times, and now people are beginning to spell rhubarb without the H, you see, and R-U-B-A-R-B is being seen on the internet. Now, if one person does it, who cares? If two people do it, who cares? But if 10,000 people do it, and that was the figure I saw on Google the other day, over 10,000 rhubarbs without the H, one day, 20, 30, 50 years' time, rhubarb without the H may be standard English spelling.
It's normal that languages have to develop. The languages are evolving through the years, and this is natural. When can you tell, when do we have to know that a word is written correctly?
Yeah. When enough people use it in that way. It takes a while. There's no rule, there's no science that can predict it. You can never predict the future with language. But if one person does it, no, that's just a single idiosyncrasy. But if thousands do it, now how long does it take for thousands to take a new word, or develop a new piece of grammar, or spell in a new way, or a new pronunciation, a new accent, you know? It can take a generation before this happens. The internet speeds things up a little bit because everybody encounters it quickly, so change is more rapid in language than ever before. So there's no science about it, but if you're a dictionary writer, you wait a while until enough people start to use a word or a spelling to make you think, this is becoming normal now.
You are talking about the written dictionaries,
Yeah.
and not about the online ones.
No, the written dictionaries, that's the tradition, of course. I've been a dictionary editor, and you wait you wait. Just because you've seen it once is not enough.
For how long?
Oh, well, I would say at least 50 occasions before you have to see the word in all different circumstances, in different newspapers, in different books, on different posters and so on. And you begin to develop in your head a sense that, this usage is normal now. And then you put it in. Now, there's no definite time for that. It could take a few days or a few weeks or a few months or a few years, decades sometimes. The internet is different because one of the problems if you're a dictionary editor using a traditional dictionary is it's that big. You know, there are only so many pages, and if you put more pages in, it's going to cost more. Nobody will buy it, and so you don't like putting new words into a dictionary. Very few get in every year. But online, there is no limit. You can have as many words as you like. So many viewers will know the Urban Dictionary, for example, in English, which is really a dictionary of slang, the kind of words that people make up on the street because it's cool to make up these new words, and they go online into the Urban Dictionary.
But there's no science there.
No, none at all. I mean, it's huge, though. It's a bigger dictionary than any printed dictionary. There's, hundreds of thousands of words online now that were never written down before. How many of them will stay in the English language? I have no idea. Most will disappear, I expect, but some will stay.
Mobile phone texting can handle only very short messages. This constraint, combined with the imagination of young minds, quickly gave rise to a new form of language. How it will develop, this language, and that you are talking about since 2001?
Yes, more or less, the last 10 years or so. Text messaging, texting, yes, or text speak, as it's often called. It's a difficult one, this. It was very popular for several years, and it seems to be dying out a bit now. I don't think it has much longer to live. You see, when it came in, the constraint to spell words differently was motivated by the fact that, well, you're doing this all the time.
There's no space and you are in a hurry.
You're in a hurry. Originally, the more letters you use, the more costly the message was. And so to write the word see in English, S-E-E, with the letter C, or the word you, Y-O-U, with the letter U, was an obvious thing to do. And so text messaging began with that kind of motivation. Now, the interesting thing is this, that those abbreviations like C for C and U for you did not start then. They'd already been in the language. They're over 100 years old. You can find them in Queen Victoria's time, in the 19th century, people playing with the language in this way. So the abbreviations weren't that new. It wasn't a new language. It was a new technology using these abbreviations in a new way. And, of course, the young people inventing some. So an invention, the famous one, of course, is LOL, meaning laughing out loud, which became very popular and started to be borrowed by other languages, too. I bet it's in Romanian text messaging as well.
PC me, please call me.
Yeah, that
or
sort of thing.
MMIT, mail me your thoughts, or are you okay?
Are you okay? That's right.
Well, the Romanians, especially the young people,
They
are
borrowed
using
them.
these terms. Do you think that this
They're
will
not
affect
going to
our
say-
language?
No, not at all. Very few will ever get into the dictionary. LOL has just got into the dictionary because so many people used it. But the vast majority of inventions that are in text messaging will never get into the dictionary. They're cool for a while, they're fashionable for a while, and then they go out of fashion. I was in a school in Britain just a few weeks ago, and I was talking to a group of 17, 18-year-olds. And one of the things we did was we collected all their text messages and looked at them. And the first thing I said was, where are all the abbreviations? Because there weren't any
Really?
at all. And they said to me, these 17-year-olds said, yeah, we used to abbreviate when we were younger. Yeah? It's no longer fashionable. One guy said to me, I stopped abbreviating when my parents started to. You see what's happened? The older generation thinks, oh, it's cool to use these abbreviations. So the mothers and fathers start to do them. And now the young people say, well, if you're doing it, I'm not doing it anymore. And so suddenly, these abbreviations are less popular in Britain now than they were even 2 or 3 years ago. I suspect that text messaging will perhaps die out using abbreviations, not using texts, of course. They will stay.
Do you think that the internet and all these new media, text messages, are a threat to the English language?
Not at all.
Or to Romanian language?
No, not to any language, no threat at all. Any new technology, people always think of it as a threat. When printing came in the 15th century, people said, oh, it's a disaster, because now all heresies will be presented everywhere around the world. When the telephone arrived in the 19th century, people said, if we're going to telephone each other, that means we'll never leave our houses, there'll be no face-to-face conversations anymore, it's a disaster. No, no, it hasn't been. When broadcasting came in the 1920s, people said, oh, we're all going to be brainwashed now, it's going to be a disaster. And what has happened in all these cases is that the new technology has brought new uses of language. Radio and television has brought sports commentary, news, interview situations, chat shows. What about the rest of the language? All of these, yes. The rest of the language has carried on as if this never happened. What has happened is broadcasting has added extra things to the language, and the internet is doing the same thing. The internet is providing us with new varieties of language: blogging, text messaging, instant messaging, Facebook, YouTube, web. All of these things are extra things. I'm speaking to you now. Do you hear any internet in what I'm saying? Not at all. I'm speaking like I would have spoken before the internet even began. So the internet has added extra richness to our language that wasn't there before. It has been a good thing, not a bad thing.
You produce more TV and radio shows about English. Why did you want to do that?
I was never proactive in this area. People asked me. In the 1980s especially, I did an awful lot of radio and a certain amount of television, but mainly radio. I think it was the climate of the time, you know. There is a point when a subject becomes noticed by the community and people say, what's it about, what's it about? And good radio and television journalists are always listening, they're always watching, and they're saying, let's do a program on that. And it's successful, good audience numbers. So they do another one, and another one, and another one. And somehow in the 1980s in Britain, language became a very popular topic. And I did dozens and dozens of programs in that decade. And now other people are doing the same sort of thing. And on television also, there are programs on language which you'd never have got in the 1960s and 70s. So language has become a very popular thing. And the reason that it has, I think, is this: that everybody is interested in language. Everybody. There are no exceptions. I've never met a human being who hasn't been interested in, for example, where does that name come from? Where does that word come from? Why do they speak differently there from there? Where are dialects? Why are there dialects? Why are there so many languages in the world? Where do the languages come from anyway? All of these questions are in people's minds, and therefore broadcasts which focus on language are always very attractive.
What about the media? What is the role of the journalist?
The role of the journalist in relation to language, I think, is to reflect what is out there. People sometimes say that, you know, the media influence language. Well, that can sometimes happen, yes. If a politician, for example, goes on radio or television and says something in a very fresh way, take Barack Obama in his victory speech, not the recent one, the one a long time ago. And he said, yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. And suddenly the whole world was saying, yes, we can. I mean, it's not the first time that that sentence has been used in English, but it suddenly became popular and people started joking about it and playing with it. And he influenced the language at that point. But normally, what goes on radio and television does not influence. What they do, journalists, and of course the people who write the plays and the soaps and all of these things, is they reflect the language, they reflect what is out there. And that's very important. You as a journalist want to make a program which is understandable by everybody. So you will use the language that people will understand. You won't invent new language for your program because they will not understand it. And so the journalist's job, on the whole, linguistically speaking, I mean, I'm not talking about what the journalist says, but how the journalist says it, is going to be a reflection of what is out there, rather than an innovation to be added to what is out there.
When we are talking about the internet, we have to refer to English globally. Do you think that this is a threat to your language or to mine?
No, on the contrary. The internet is the best friend that languages have ever had, especially if you speak a minority language or an endangered language. Now, let's get some statistics here. There are about 6,000 languages in the world, maybe a few more. And something like half of them are so seriously endangered that they are likely to die out in the course of this century. There are 50 or 60 languages in the world spoken by just one person left, the last speaker only. Another 1,000 languages which are spoken by 100 or 200 speakers. And these languages are likely to die. Now, in many cases, the community wants the language to live. So how do you get a language to live? In the old days, where you had to put it in a newspaper or find a television program, that was so difficult to do, and it hardly ever happened. Now the internet, and especially mobile phone technology, means that your endangered language, your minority language, can be out there. At the press of a button, you can have your language in front of the whole world. It's inexpensive, so long as you've got a connection of some kind. So suddenly the internet has become a great friend to minority and endangered languages, and also now to the other languages of the world which are not endangered. So take all the languages of Europe. Hardly any of them are seriously endangered, but everybody's worried about their language and about its future, and especially because English has been a dominant influence on languages. All the English words that are coming into French and German and Romanian and all the other languages. Not a big deal, because remember that English itself has borrowed words from all those languages in the first place. 80% of the vocabulary of English has come from French and German and Italian and so on and so forth. And so languages always borrow from each other. But the internet is showing these languages in a new way. The internet is now a multilingual phenomenon. It wasn't when it started. In the 1990s, it was basically English. But today, there are 3,000 languages on the internet, and it's becoming increasingly multilingual as time goes by. So I see the internet as being a great popularizer of language diversity.
I am so happy to have the chance to meet you. Thank you very much.
Well, it's been a delight. Thank you for your interest.